Okay, so Spider-Man 2. I've been doing a deep dive on Spider-Man 2 for a few weeks now, doing an article for HeroGoHome.com, and I've found something that I've not seen addressed somewhere else. And I apologize if this sounds like some kind of high school paper about, describe the symbolism in Spider-Man 2. But the thing is, I'm not the kind of guy who notices or analyzes symbolism very often, so I'm kind of jazzed to have found this, especially since it's kind of subtle. And this is also noteworthy because Spider-Man 2 was directed by Sam Raimi, who is perhaps the most unsubtle of all filmmakers on Earth. So it really surprises me to find two fairly subtle repeating symbols in Spider-Man 2. It was even more surprising when I found the way those two symbols tie into each other, but that's going to come at the end. My name is Tony Frazier, author, blogger, near genius, and this is Hero Go Home presents Spider-Man 2, Roses and Reflections. Okay, first up, roses. This one's fairly obvious, I guess. Here is the first shot after the credits of Spider-Man 2. It shows Mary Jane Watson, the great love of Peter Parker's life, on a billboard advertising Emma Rose perfume. Like I say, at first glance, symbolism's very obvious. Roses are red, and MJ is a redhead. Also, and more importantly, MJ is the love of Peter's life, and roses are the flowers that symbolize love, for most of us here in America at least. But notice that this is only the word rose, a symbol for the thing, not the thing itself. Peter, who has loved Mary Jane since before the beginning of the first Spider-Man, refused to accept her love when she offered it at the end of the first film. We are given obvious signs that they're still into each other, but they both outwardly deny it. She even goes so far as to say,
"I'm seeing somebody now."
Which is when Peter impulsively says he will see her play the next night, as a kind of half-assed way to keep the door open for himself. Now, on the way to the play, he buys her flowers, but notice in this flower shop, what kind of flowers don't we see? This is a flower shop with carnations and peonies and snapdragons, but no roses. Peter ends up missing the play because he's busy saving the day as Spider-Man, and after the play, he sees Mary Jane in the arms of another man. I guess she wasn't just bluffing about seeing someone else. He ends up walking home alone past dozens of mocking pictures of MJ as Emma Rose. Later, Peter is assigned by J. Jonah Jameson to take pictures at a gala celebrating his hero's son, John Jameson the astronaut. Now, if you had seen the trailers before seeing the film, this particular twist would have already been spoiled, but in this shot, just before the twist, there's a bit of foreshadowing. That girl next to Peter at the right edge of the frame, that's someone we've seen before, sitting next to Mary Jane in the dressing room before the play. And sure enough, the next moment we see MJ on John Jameson's arm. But wait, did I say a bit of foreshadowing? I meant 2 bits, because here in the upper right corner, see this word? That word is rose. Once again, the love of Peter's life, in theory at least, is being kept from him. Not only that, she's getting married, and there's the word rose to prove it. It's after this that Spider-Man loses his powers and begins to live as just ordinary Peter Parker again. And we see the Emma Rose perfume ad again, but notice what's different. It's just her face. The word rose, if it's there at all, is not even visible. Does this mean it's possible for Peter to regain her love again? Let's skip to the end. MJ discovers Peter's secret. 2 secrets, actually. The secret that he's Spider-Man, and the other secret that he still loves her. But he can't be with her because danger, blah, blah, blah. Which leads to Mary Jane's wedding. Her bouquet looks like it's made of lilies, not roses. But cut to the groom waiting in the chapel. What's that on his lapel? Why, look at that. It's a white rose. It's a real white rose. And sure enough, Mary Jane, Peter's white rose, has fled the chapel to declare her love for Peter, and he can finally accept it and return it. Aww. Okay, let's forget roses for a second and go to reflections. Sam Raimi often uses reflections in the Spider-Man series to signal characters contemplating evil actions. Norman Osborn looks in the mirror to argue with his Green Goblin persona in the first film. In the second film, Harry Osborn argues with the ghost of his father, and it happens in the third film too. Also in the third film, our first glimpse of the black-suited Spider-Man is him seeing his own reflection in this skyscraper window. Even Mary Jane stares into a mirror right before breaking John Jameson's heart. Aww. But the reflections in Spider-Man 2 are their own beast, as we'll see. They are very deliberate, for one thing, created through visual effects, so we know they've got to mean something. If the rose is Mary Jane, the reflection is Dr. Octopus. We see the reflection in basically 4 scenes. During the accident that creates Dr. Octopus, we see the reflection of Dr. Octopus's wife in a flying shard of glass, and then the reflection of her face on the flying shard of glass reflected in her eye right before she dies. And this is moments before the accident that actually creates Dr. Octopus. Later, as a team of doctors are about to cut the tentacles off of Dr. Octopus, we see one of the tentacles start to move, reflected in the goggles of the doctor. Much later in the film, Peter and Mary Jane meet in a coffee shop. We push in through the reflection on the outside window to see them talking inside the coffee shop, and then moments before they're about to kiss, we see Mary Jane's face reflected in Peter's glasses just a second before Dr. Octopus begins his attack by throwing a car through the window. And then the final reflection that we see from Dr. Octopus is in his glasses as Spider-Man approaches for their climactic final fight. So, okay, we keep seeing reflections before things that are related to Dr. Octopus, before his creation, before his tentacles first come to life, before one of his attacks, and before the big climactic fight. But why a reflection for Dr. Octopus? Well, what is a reflection? A reflection is something that looks almost exactly the same, but at the same time is completely opposite. So, here's Peter Parker and Otto Octavius. They both have alliterative names. They're both scientific super geniuses. They both gain superpowers from scientific accidents, and, not incidentally, they're both named after 8-limbed creatures. But Peter is shy, where Octavius is outgoing and charming. Peter uses his powers to save people, while Octavius has no problem hurting people to achieve his goals. Peter has denied himself love out of fear, while Octavius conquered that fear, declared his love to the woman of his dreams, and married her, right before he lost her due to his own hubris. Which leads to my final point. If Peter and Octavius are reflections, then Mary Jane and Mrs. Octavius are also reflections of each other. And what would you like to bet is Mrs. Octavius's name?
Rosie, our new friend thinks I'm going to blow up the city.
Now, I don't know if this is just meant to serve as a further reflection or if this is meant to telegraph something that Raimi was planning for a future sequel. If Mrs. Octavius dies after Octavius declares his love to her, could the same thing happen to Mary Jane? Are they setting up a future death of Mary Jane for a sequel that never got made, or that got made differently than they wanted to get it made because of studio pressure? I don't know. You tell me. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. I will ask you that if you like it, share it with your friends. I'm not going to ask you to press the subscribe button because I still don't have any kind of pipeline for producing these videos in any kind of regular basis, so what would you be subscribing to? It's like vaporware. It's like the Duke Nukem of YouTube channels. Anyway, I'll see you next time.